Thing about Donald Trump, I'm putting together pulling out of the Paris Accord, which was a useless nothing. I mean, I love the arguments for staying in the Paris Accord. It doesn't require you to do anything. Well, then what difference does it make? I mean, so we pull out of it. But it was, in fact, the way it was written like a treaty. It had words like you shall do this, and we must do this, and all this stuff. And it would have just given the left carte blanche to sue every time somebody did something like repeal some stupid regulation that was hampering businesses and hampering jobs. So it was a good thing to pull out. It wasn't going to help. We've been innovation and capitalism have been really helping us cut back on carbon emissions, which is fine. But he was pulling out of the Paris Accord, and his tweet storm after the horror in London, which people are picking on him about, and everybody's yelling at him about. You know, he tweeted immediately after London. He picked on the mayor of London, who is an appeaser. He's an appeaser, and like Trump went after him. He said we got to bring back the travel ban and all this stuff, and everybody's saying, oh, he's cold, he's mean, he's brutal, he's bully. Here's the thing: a lot of times in life, your strengths and your weaknesses are the same. You know, I work very hard. That's one of my strengths, but I also can be a workaholic. That's one of my weaknesses. I think this is true of virtually everybody. You know, you might be relaxed and it might lead you to be lazy. It might be jovial. It might make you sometimes uncaring. All these things, all your strengths are also weaknesses. There is something uncouth and raw about Donald Trump that goes right up my spine as a couth, not raw person. I mean, as a civilized human being, there's something about him that goes right up my spine. But we have been living in a PC China shop for way, way too long, and he is breaking the China in that shop, and that is one of his strengths. I mean, when you pull out of this Paris Accord and you get the kind of insane reaction, this is the end of the world, it's all over, you know, it's a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, he pulls out, first of all, his speech was completely rational, completely fact-based, very calm, you know, very easygoing saying this is why I'm doing it. We'll play one cut from the Trump speech pulling out.
So we're getting out, but we will start to negotiate, and we will see if we can make a deal that's fair. And if we can, that's great. And if we can't, that's fine. As president, I can put no other consideration before the well-being of American citizens. The Paris Climate Accord is simply the latest example of Washington entering into an agreement that disadvantages the United States to the exclusive benefit of other countries, leaving American workers, who I love, and taxpayers to absorb the cost in terms of lost jobs, lower wages, shuttered factories, and vastly diminished economic production. Thus, as of today, the United States will cease all implementation of the non-binding Paris Accord and the draconian financial and economic burdens the agreement imposes on our country.
So now you have like Tom Steyer, who is this Democrat billionaire who probably wants to run for president, and he says this is a traitorous act of war against the American people. So that's a reserved, wise judgment. And here, let's just listen to Al Gore for a minute. I mean, this is the response. This is the opposition. One guy, Donald Trump, he's supposed to be a wild man. He's supposed to be a crazy man. He says, look, this isn't good economically. It won't have a big effect environmentally. We can do good things without it. I have to take care of the American people. Now, George Stephanopoulos is talking to Al Gore. Listen to this.
So does it really make all that much difference then if the United States pulls out of the Paris Climate Accord? Remember back, the United States under George W. Bush pulled out of Kyoto, yet the innovation continued after that.
Well, we lost a lot of time when did not join the rest of the world community then. And while it is true that we have this sustainability revolution underway, and it's very exciting, it has the magnitude of the Industrial Revolution, but the speed of the digital revolution. But we're still not changing fast enough because it's not just the scientific community warning us now, it's Mother Nature. Every night on the TV news is like a nature hike through the book of Revelation. 70% of Florida is in drought right now. Missouri just declared an emergency with another one of these historic climate-related downpours. We've had 11 once-in-a-thousand-year downpours in less than 10 years in the United States. So we have to move faster. It's good news that the rest of the world is. It's good news that states and cities and businesses are. But we need presidential leadership. Since he's not going to lead, the American people are stepping up.
So it's the book of Revelations. That's calm, and all of his facts are untrue. I mean, there have been far worse droughts. It was worse. The Dust Bowl was a worse drought. I mean, the Dust Bowl in the 30s was insane. It turned, a huge swath of America into the Sahara. That's when all you had the Okies and all that stuff moving to California to get away from. It's like it's ridiculous. The storms. We don't have the kind of records where you can compare storms. But hurricane, they kept saying tornadoes were going to get worse, hurricanes were going to get worse. That hasn't happened. Tornadoes is a little different because there's a lot more people around and a lot better ways of communicating tornadoes. So we see more tornadoes, but there's no real evidence that we're having more tornadoes. It's just all nonsense. So on one hand, this is the thing that Trump, in his willingness to take this hit, in his willingness to have the press come out and say these things about him, because of course, as you know, on the mainstream media, one after another, oh, what a mess, the world is in a mess, this is so terrible, one after another, because he doesn't care that much, and he is willing to walk into that china shop and break these things. These guys are exposed for what they are. If one guy is arguing this is bad economically and not that useful environmentally, and the other side is saying, oh, it's the book of Revelation, who are people going to believe ultimately? And one of the things that the polls show, the polls show that a lot of people, like maybe a third of the people think this is a serious issue, but about 2 to 4% think it is a primary issue. So if you really believed this was the end of the world, it would be a lot more than 2 to 4%. And here is the other side of this, is this world, our relationships with the world. He's getting in the way. When Barack Obama talks about people rejecting the future, I just love that, this idea. They know what the future is. The future is what is in their head. And if you don't like that, or you disagree with it, or you think the future should go elsewhere, you're not just against them. You don't have a different opinion. You are rejecting the future itself. So here's Fareed Zakaria explaining that how Donald Trump has essentially sold America down the river.
This will be the day that the United States resigned as the leader of the free world. It's nothing short of that. The irresponsibility of this act is breathtaking, because the Paris Climate Accords are actually extraordinarily flexible. They do not dilute American sovereignty. They allow every country to make its own plans. That's why countries that have jealously guarded their sovereignty, like China, like India, like Russia, have all signed on. There are 194 other countries that have signed on to this, including the countries that Donald Trump keeps saying always beat us in these agreements. They're all in.
They're all in. All the countries in the world are in, except there's 2, I think, that didn't sign. Why do you think that is? It's because it doesn't mean anything. It's because only the top guy, us, is going to get hurt. Wouldn't you sign on to a deal where the top guy said, oh, I'm not going to compete as hard because we're so far ahead of you, we're going to be nice? I mean, it's like some AAA team signing on to an agreement that the Yankees are not going to bring up their cleanup hitter. It's like of course they're all signed on, and we have absconded from our leadership of the free world by not obeying the free world, by not following the free world. I mean, this was Obama's leadership from behind that you're always following. So what I'm saying is the important thing, that the treaty itself was just going to be an annoyance. It was just going to be an annoyance. And by the way, since it was, in fact, the language of a treaty, and all the other countries ratified it the way treaties are ratified in their countries, why didn't we send it to the Senate, which is what you have to do to a treaty here? Why does it just have Obama's signature on it as if it were an executive order? And the reason is the Democrats weren't going to vote for it. The Republicans weren't going to vote for it, and the Democrats weren't going to vote for it because it killed jobs, and they didn't want to go back to their districts and their states and say, "Oh yeah, I killed jobs, but I saved the world from sunshine." Okay, so this is the thing. We have been wrapped into this fantasy world of climate catastrophe, and Trump, because he's a bull in a china shop,